Good morning, colleagues and guests. I'm Michael Julius. I have the privilege of shepherding the research enterprise here at Sunnybrook. First order of business is to welcome all of you to this year's Medventions Innovation Day. And first two pieces of really important business are to thank our sponsors, Baylis and Servier, and also to thank the organizing committee, because everybody should, under the leadership of Ahmed and Jean. Ahmed, where are you? Ahmed, there's Ahmed. Jean, are you here? Jean is outside, so wait a second. Days like this do not just happen. A lot of work goes into it. Ahmed's a little bit nervous today. Actually, he pretends he's not. So what I would like you to do is, could we applaud our organizers, please? Thank you, thank you. So to set the stage, the driving theme that underpins all that we do at SRI is discovery to clinical impact through the medical marketplace. The Medvention program builds on that theme, accelerating the translation of discovery into the clinic, towards the creation of products and systems that benefit our patients, Sunnybrook's patients, Ontarians, Canadians, and in the spirit of today's theme, way beyond our borders. Thinking globally. It underpins doing better business better, all the way from efficient product development, efficient garnering of regulatory approvals, and implementing broad-based marketing strategies, all of which predicate success. And we're starting a teaching, have started actually, a teaching and learning process right here at home through Medventions. It is a physician-led, hospital-based training program that started just 2 years ago. So was this day, the second innovation day, the fifth innovation? So you see, we were doing a lot of prep work, launched in 2016. And as of today, it's hosted 5 multidisciplinary teams in both the Schulich Heart and Holland Bone and Joint programs. And the innovation pipeline is strong and flourishing and has landed protectable assets. The program, it's irrefutable, is proving to be a transformative experience for all of the participants, both the teachers and the learners, creating and expanding knowledge, nurturing critical thinking, goodness, we never have enough of that, and inspiring new ideas and creativity. So I am actually dedicated to congratulating our conceptual founders for successes thus far and wishing them best wishes for a stellar trajectory, and of course, wish you all an insightful day. So first, let's applaud our founders, bringing us all together. Thanks very much, colleagues, and without further ado, I'm pleased to invite Andy Smith, our President and Chief Executive, to the podium. Andy. Good.
Good morning, everybody, and hearty welcome to you all to Sunnybrook. I'd like to start by echoing Michael's congratulations to the organizers, and really it is wonderful to see all of you from across the city and beyond here. Just for a show of hands, just so I have a sense of this, how many of you work immediately within a hospital or academic health science center setting, within the walls, for example, of an organization like Sunnybrook? So as I look around, one of the things that's abundantly clear is it's many, but by no means all. There's a substantial group of people here from sectors outside of what we traditionally think of as a hospital. So I want to, in my opening remarks, really kind of touch on two areas. And the first area, I'm going to talk a little bit about Sunnybrook, but I recognize when I'm speaking about Sunnybrook, I'm actually speaking about all of our Ontario or Canadian academic health science centers. So of course, I'm very proud as CEO of this organization that we see 1.25 million patients per year, and that we have services that we provide in really significant areas of healthcare. For example, trauma and burn, urgent cardiac care, stroke, complex cancer, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really important to Ontarians, delivery of that type of care. But it's really important to emphasize that that is not enough. Our mandate as an academic health science center here at Sunnybrook, all of our academic health science centers, is to do so much more, to not accept that the present is as good as we can get, but indeed that we fully expect to be better as the future unfolds. So for Sunnybrookers, that is crystallized in our vision statement, inventing the future of healthcare. And it's abundantly clear, I'm sure, how days like today really speak to the importance of that driving ethos that really brings all of us here today. We are first and foremost here because the patients of today, and importantly, the patients of tomorrow, indeed us, depends on the minds and the aspirations of folks in rooms like this today to make tomorrow better. So I wanted to highlight that as the first point. The second is one of the areas, and this is one of the reasons I'm so personally bullish on Medventions and why people like Brad Strauss and Graham Wright and Ahmed know that I'm so very supportive of Medventions, is because I feel that there's a general sense within all of us here in Ontario and within Canada that we know this is a space that we can, indeed we ought to be doing better, faster at. And in my current role, I have opportunity to sit at numerous tables where there is sort of a grasping of this issue of how do we get better in the space of inventing new things, getting into the medical marketplace, basically building the knowledge economy and more rapidly building a better future in our healthcare. And we realize it's there, we can just see it within our grasp, but we haven't quite reached that. For me, it's crystallized best when I hear people say, you know what, on the global stage, Canada is a fantastic place to do research. And make no mistake about it, the clinical trials and so forth that come out of our relatively small population are way above their weight. But, and it's a big and important but, we have not landed it anywhere close to our satisfaction with respect to being big dogs, if you will, on the next leg of the journey, on being that nation, that group of individuals that push us as a leader in getting things into the medical marketplace and really defining the direction of the future of healthcare. But we know we can and we want to, and I feel very strongly that groups of people such as those gathered here today will in fact steward and lead that charge into the future. So once again, welcome to you all. It's great to see you here today. Look, I hope that you have a terrific day, and as we open our viewfinder to a global view, and all the best for a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy and Michael, for really coming here and demonstrating the commitment of senior leadership to this journey that we started about 5 years ago. My name is Graham Wright. I am one of the co-founders with Brian Courtney and Brad Strauss of the Medventions program. And as I say, 5 years ago, we started the idea of let's have a day dedicated to this, and let's get a lecture series going, and then finally let's get the internships going. And the idea was to just start to develop a culture where people were actively thinking about how to move clinical ideas, addressing real clinical problems through the process where we can actually have an impact and get those ideas out broadly, get them used in common practice. Obviously, that has to go through things like clinical trials, but ultimately the technologies associated with them have to be commercialized so that there's those tools are available on a broad spectrum. Over the course of the 5 years we've had this Medventions Day, we started with how do you come up with the idea in the first place? How do you get that initial round of funding? How do you get that group together to form the startup? How do you start developing your prototypes? And we've worked our way through. And I think this year is actually very exciting because it kind of brings us to one of the most, the real driver of this whole process is how do you get out to the broader market, especially for folks who start in Canada. In Canada, while is a great laboratory for coming up with these ideas, is not the big market. It's not the place that's going to help these companies really become the broad successes that they need to be. They need to be active on a global stage. And that's really what's driven the theme of the day. And I'm very excited the day's kind of broken up into 3 areas. To start with, we'll look at some major markets and some perspectives on those major markets. 2 of the biggest countries in the world population-wise, India and China, will have speakers to talk about what's going on in those markets. How do you approach those markets? We're very excited to have a colleague associated with the efforts in Israel, because Israel, more than any other country, has demonstrated how a small country can go big in medical devices, how they can interact. And so we'll get that perspective. There are successes. We recognize that we still bat under our weight in commercialization in Canada of medical devices, but there are successes, and we're going to get, in the second part of our program, 3 case studies of companies that are going global and how they're succeeding in that process. And finally, we're going to come back to the local environment and the tools that are developing in this local environment to help move individuals go to that next stage. And so hopefully that'll kind of help you to build your networking and how do you get started in this process. So I hope you all enjoy the day. I hope during the breaks you get a lot of interactions. As Andy mentioned, there are people from the Academic Health Sciences Centers here. There's people from Technology Transfer. There's people from the Board of Trade here. We welcome all of our guests who are involved in this whole process. It's a great networking opportunity. Please make sure you talk to a lot of people in the breaks, because I think it's the network which drives this whole process. It's knowing who to talk to when you need to go to that next stage. And I think this brings all of those individuals together. So as much this session is about talks, it's also about the conversations you have in that hallway. So we really encourage that. And we hope this is kind of the catalyst for groups going forward, taking that idea to the next stage, thinking of, from the start, how am I going to get this out into the global marketplace? So with that, I'd like to open the day and pass the session over to my co-founder, Brad Strauss, who will introduce our first speaker and moderate the first session.
Thanks, Graham. My name is Brad Strauss. I'm the chief of the Schulich Heart program here at Sunnybrook. On behalf of the program, I also want to welcome everyone for coming and appreciate all the enthusiasm for the agenda that we've set here today and for everyone arriving on some tough weather conditions and road conditions. I can't remember, several years ago, I was sitting in my laboratory and a couple came by who were on a tour of the facility, and they just happened to stop by the bench where I was sitting to talk to me about what I was doing. And we just through this surreptitious meeting, I got to know them, and their name is Paul and Penny Minz. And because of their support of the program at the earliest stages of what was the idea of Medventions, we have been able to start the program, grow it, and really bring it to the stage that it is now, and hopefully continue to grow it. And all of us here are very grateful for their support. It's interesting how chance meetings can lead to real change in what you do and what you bring to the table. And so the first lecture we have here today, we have named in honor of Paul and Penny Minz. Unfortunately, they are unable to be here today to see the lecture about that we've named in their honor. Their son Ian I think is supposed to come. I'm not sure if he's in the room. Is Ian there? Ian, so thank you very much, and please relay our thanks to your parents for So the first part of the agenda today is about understanding international markets, and we'll have 3 speakers. The first one, which will be the Paul and Penny Minz keynote lecture, is by Dr. Dinesh Shah. Dinesh I met actually a couple times over the past year at the major cardiology meetings. One was TCT, and the other one in a very amazing meeting of innovation in Israel called ICI. And Dinesh he is an interventional cardiologist at William Beaumont. And of course, I'm an interventional cardiologist, so we have that in common. But Dinesh has done so many interesting things in his lives, besides being a superb interventional cardiologist at a very high level center in just outside of Detroit. Dinesh has actually formed several different companies. He's the medical director of Envision Scientific, co-inventor, first in the world polymer-free drug-eluting stent, which uses nanotechnology and converts to Versta in 8 months. He's medical director of Concept Medical, which has invented a very interesting drug-eluting balloon, co-founder and medical director of Real 3D. He's editor-in-chief for the Journal of Digital Healthcare. He's been the founder of disruptive, internationally acclaimed educational centers across India. So he's made some amazing contributions to so many different areas of medical medicine, both as a deliverer of medicine and also as a developing concepts and companies and innovation. So I think he's going to be a terrific recipient of the Paul and Penny Minz lecture. And the title of his lecture today is The Journey of the Indian Startup Company. I want to welcome Dinesh and thank you very much for coming here today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Brad, for having me here today. I hope I can do the justice for what you have been trying to talk about me. I wanted to find out today, my wife is here too, by the way, my worst critic of my life and my life partner. She wanted to make sure I do a good job or she will have a whole 4 hours going back talking about my talk. So giving this opportunity today, as I think Brad and I met a couple times, and Brian and myself, ended up to Jerusalem and spent 4 hours together. It was interesting to find out about the Medventions, and I was very excited. And it's just going back a little bit of a journey before I start my talk, because it is a journey. I'm going to talk about the journey. I'm going to go and talk about a few things that I learned on my way to the journey, sitting in America, being a cardiologist in clinical practice, how I got associated with startup companies in India, how I started my innovations in some other different areas. My number one DNA of my life has been a great observant, willingness to try, create the boundaries and cross the boundaries, work with people with intense passion, and having the work ethic behind it. The first time I'm talking about going back to my fellowship time in 1998, I'm sitting with Richard Myler in Pebble Beach, California on a golf course. And I don't know how the conversation together worked. I don't know how many of the people know Richard Myler here. He was the first interventional done in America by him as an angioplasty. And I was sitting with him and asking him a question, Dr. Myler, every day when you wake up in the morning, what goes through your head and what never leaves you? He said, first of all, Dinesh, nobody has asked me this question before, but thanks for asking it. And to make it very brief, he said, Dinesh, when I was sitting in an auditorium in Andreas Grunzig, first intervention angioplasty, I thought the balloon inflation, balloon deflation, restoration of the blood flow, having the EKG back to normal, and suddenly patient going home next day. He thought this is a plumbing. This is what we did in urology, dilating the ureter and getting the stones out. This is the way we delivered the babies, why we did not have the cross-pollination of knowledge across different disciplines. Once we leave the medical school, sometimes we get so involved and so engaged with our own everyday clinical work, we sometimes forget our colleagues may have found the solution what we are facing as a problem in our field. So this was the beginning of my thinking about cross-pollination of knowledge and inventions that can only happen by having the networking, creating some cross-pollination of knowledge. Let's get back to the journey here. Anybody is working in any Indian companies right now today from this audience? Anybody has been to India and any business trips or any conferences here? So very few. There is an appetite to go to India. Let me walk through the journey and some of the challenges that we face as the second largest, I think, population and probably the largest democracy of the world. So as I said, I'm going to go back and talk about the people, the product, the coincidence, what the journey we traveled, what products we had, how we created the IP portfolio, what we created, the clinically challenging cases in cardiology interventional world, and how we have tried to overcome those challenges, and what lessons learned. And I'll leave with some final thoughts about my journey and a couple of other things and where the company is going forward from here. Yes, here we met together in Jerusalem. This is the first beginning of our friendship started. This is about me. I think he already mentioned a few of the things about me being an interventional cardiologist in Michigan and also having my innovative DNA. I have tried now to work with some sleep apnea and orthodontic devices. I can't afford to pay $14,000 for my 2 kids to orthodontist, and I realized that we need to change that world. How to disrupt that thing in a fashion that we are working on, my 3D polymer scientists, 3 of them, to create some Bluetooth technology and a force and traction and moving your teeth with your Bluetooth with your phone, so you don't have to worry about going to your doctor and have a 3D imaging done yourself and sending it to your orthodontist. I'm also working my first journal of digital healthcare. I feel, as I think the leadership were mentioned here, the healthcare is changing in front of our eyes with robotics, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, and creating some cloud computing and so many different facets right now that we're working with. So I thought maybe we needed to create a platform that will allow us to have an open access journal and create some robust discussion through this journal platform. And the next one I just started last year, the whole idea, and it's in a very, very initial primitive stage of creating an American College of Digital Healthcare. And this was very interesting. I saw the first time the American College of Cardiology having, again, innovation and digital healthcare as a subchapter of this. So let me go back what I think Bradley mentioned, how the life changes in your life and how the coincidence can happen. Sitting in India, visiting my parents, 11 o'clock at night, having a coffee with my dad, and I get a phone call from my wife. Would you please mind seeing one of my best friend's brother tomorrow? He's working on some very interesting cardiology devices and stent, and he wanted your opinion. And I'm usually there in India between 3 to 5 days, and usually I don't try to meet people too many times outside my dad. But I couldn't say no to my wife because I had to accompany her in the plane in public place going back to America. So I said, okay, I'm going to accept this and I will meet with your friend's brother. So they walk in the morning in Marriott Hotel. The 2 gentlemen, Indian guys, walking in with the little jeans and their sport jackets with their little bags. And I'm sitting in a coffee shop over there. And the introduction is the gentleman that I'm having here right now besides me is Manish Doshi. And I think I'd like to get a 3 minutes or less than 2 minutes of introduction of this man. This is the man who got first time how the coincidence starts. He works in jewelry. He's a textile engineer. He used to work in some processes in textiling and some kind of coating technology and some jewelry in the Diamond City, India, which is Surat. And also now they call it Silk City also. And per capita highest income in Gujarat right now and in India, besides Mumbai. He comes and asks me the questions about me first, whether I'm going to be interested in this with him. And then he gave me the first 3 statements that I have the solution for the world for the drug-coated sirolimus balloon. I have the solution for the world for instant restenosis, small vessel disease, and diabetic patients, while I have the polymer-free drug-eluting stent. And I also have one which is biodegradable drug-eluting stent, which is the out of the world than any and all current available stent markets. But I need help. I need somebody who can help me through my regulatory affairs. I need help to validate my technology. I need help to coordinate and work with some of the KOLs of the world and give me some opportunity to work with my domestic market, because I am an Indian graduate from Bombay, India, and I knew quite a few influential and very movers and shakers cardiology community of India. And I looked at him and I said, why you and why me help you? And I'm sitting in America, what's going to happen? He said, you know what, I think the Skype and technology today, you come and visit my plant, meet my people, and then let's decide after that where and how we can help together. So he was in his preclinical trial stage and willingness to take it to the clinical trial during the time. And I think the first thing I realized from him is devotion, his determination, and the determination as we continued talking to him longer became very obvious. The first time when he saw a small little thin luster tube sent to him from Germany to do a laser cutting as a jewelry and as a guy sitting in Surat as a diamond guy, as a technology and an engineer, he goes and asks his friend and a colleague, he says, what is this for? He said, this is a life-saving device. This is the stent. And then the discussion continued. And he said, okay, this is like in thousands of dollars people charge for it, but the cost of the tube is probably less than 15 rupees, which is less than 50 cents. He suddenly realized that, oh, wow, it's a life-saving device, an opportunity of the life. And he took this challenge, and he was the first man in India today getting this device done in 2001 and manufactured and started from zero. Once he got to the level that he became very prominent, successful with his team, with some investors, his CEO brought him to the room one day and fires him without any cause, without any reasons. And he starts from zero again, or maybe got -2. He got devastated, but he never gave up his hope. During this journey of 6 years, he realized that there's an opportunity across the whole industry that many of the MNCs of the world have not solved the problems. And he said, I'm going to take the challenge. And this is where I think the whole idea of his creating his team, intensity, passion, learning the landscape of the technology market and innovations in cardiology, and started his journey. When we met together, his dream was to be the first device company from India to make a global impact. His dream was to get the first device company of India to make it into the IPO level. He was the first company of India to solve the problem that MNCs have not solved the problems. So all three sounded like a significant passion. Then we need to just follow through our work ethics, put the right money, right people, and the right roadmap together. So these are the two companies he created. Envision Scientific, which is a stent-based company, which is basically based on the advancing the innovation that has already been existing. And the second one was the Concept Medical, changed the concept to reality, which was a balloon-based company for drug-coated sirolimus balloons. So these are the four products that we have there. The albuminous, which is sirolimus eluting stent. This is the stent where, I don't know how many of you are in cardiology besides Brad and whoever, Brian. Anybody in cardiology knows about stent and balloons here, so I want to be very mindful about how much I say and what I need to. Okay. So this is basically a pre-crimped stent on a balloon, and then we are going a coating on that with the nanotechnology deliveries and delivering the drug into the vessel wall where there's a disease and treat the disease of atherosclerosis in the cardiology, coronary artery disease rather. The stent is different than the current existing market in two ways. One, this is a pre-crimped stent that we have mounted into the balloon, and then we are doing the coating. The existing current, any and all the drug-eluting stents are actually coated and then crimped back onto the balloon. Two, this because we are doing the coating on this balloon and the stent together, we are covering almost 95% of the vessel wall versus only 14 to 16% of the vessel wall when we do a coating of the stent alone, which is only a small little surface area. So we have far more drug delivery happening into the drug, into the area of the disease. How that benefits? The reason is because in diabetic patients, the disease is diffuse, it's not a focal disease. So we need to actually deliver far more homogeneously the drug into the vessel wall versus what current existing stent only gives you 14 to 16% surface area covered. And we still have significant advances in that direction, but we still will deal with the stenosis or in-stent restenosis between 6 to 10% of the cases. Those are the areas, in particular, this technology have reduced down to 2.5 to 3% at this point. I don't have the luxury to give this data here because this is not a scientific exhibition here and talk about the science, but this particular stent gives you a significant advantage in diabetic patient. It creates a small little film before the drug has been reduced, delivered into the vessel wall, creates also an opportunity, and Brad will understand what I'm talking is a no reflow phenomenon, which is a common problem in acute myocardial infarction. Let's go back to the next one is the Magic Touch, which is the drugs coated sirolimus balloon. This is the safest drug for any and all coronary artery disease that we see today. And this is the particular balloon that we have created, the technology together, and took it to the clinical studies also now and proven. And now it's in commercial use, by the way, in about 65 different countries. I've taken it from India, from small country, to take it to the global level. And we'll go through some of the challenges we went through. This is the drug-coated sirolimus balloon, the first of the world. And it is right now showing this result better than any and all other current existing commercial market in Europe right now. More research and data is right now piling up together. The similar version of the Magic Touch, we are using it for the peripheral arteries, which is extreme touch balloon. Currently, the technology is the same. It's a nano carrier with the nano drug, with an excipient that allows you to diffuse the drug with a larger surface area with smaller molecules into the vessel wall and creates a very, very, very longer retention of drug for its effect. And the focus NP is still under evaluation right now, which is the polymer-free drug-eluting stent in the world right now that is going on a first-in-man study right now. This is the most interesting part of this small little company over there. They have every certification you can think of, that they have invested their complete devotion of technology, developing it and protecting around it for the IP to making sure that they have something unique, including their ISO 9001. And I don't want to go into detail, but every certification you can think of, they've achieved the goals to get there. So what are the key challenges, what we face together? It's a pretty big list of things, but I'll tell you the 4 pillars of any new startup companies, whether it's from America, India, China, or any place of the world, is number 1, you have to know your product. You have to know the innovation that you are trying to pursue. You have to deal with your team, core team, with passion, intensity, work ethics, and knowledge. And now comes the funding part. So when I met with Manish the first time, I think besides the technology, I take it to the next level. His biggest problem is money, the funding part. And when he had some offers on the table to get the funding, he was nervous, he was not comfortable, and he was not really ready to get into this relationship because it was only the money with no strategic dollars coming to them. There was no patience level. When you get the venture capitals involved in this kind of world and or private equities, they are all looking for their multiples and exit. Most of the time, they do not have the same level of passion, intensity in changing the world in a meaningful way in your clinical relevant work. So I went with him together, sat with those people, looked at the term sheet, looked at all the details, and figured it out where and how, the milestones, the challenges, how to take the company over when they were going to put some money in. And I told him, Manish, it's time for us to have a little bit more patience. I took up the phone and I started talking to people after I came back to America and calling few people, my colleague physicians, my contacts in India, my contacts in my different parts of the world, who were similar minded, who were into cardiology, who were into healthcare. And some of these people were willing to come up forward and then put some money into this. The whole idea of this funding was a biggest challenge, in my opinion. Either the innovation goes further or innovation dies, or your governance changes in your innovation, where suddenly your whole course of future direction of your innovation may completely change. So it is very critical for any and all startup companies, in my opinion, whether it's here or in India. I had to meet with their angel investors. Majority of them were in journey with him for 3 to 5 years and getting impatient. They were basically trying to put Manish out of business. At that point of time, I had to give them a little bit of more reassurance about the validity of the Manish's journey, validity of his products and innovations. I met with the board. Board was not very kind to Manish also at that time. And I keep saying Manish over here because he's the center figure before I joined his company. And I had to become the medical director, coordinator, maybe a mentor, maybe a glue, and maybe a spokesperson and a bad cop, combination of all, where I had to sit in front of some of the most difficult conversations. And if any of you have been part of these board meetings, when you have to talk about your funding and your money and where the innovation is going and what the equities and what the term sheets are, trust me, it is not the most healthiest conversation happens. It makes you feel very small. It humiliates you. It makes you feel cry there. But at the same time, you have to have the patience and you have to value the people who have already invested money into you. The major important thing, the other thing I found out in domestic market, it was just amazing as technology continued to evolve. The Indian cardiologists, for some reason, in spite of having a best products, a very challenging innovations and a very innovative products, had tough time to accept it. And the reason was you do not have an FDA trial done. And I said, you have got an FDA approved 40 plus patents on this guy. The preclinical studies were done. The FDA patents are done. We have already done first in men 200 patients with safety efficacy data. And why you are not giving this just gentleman a chance to at least create some registry, create some prospective study, and give him a chance. It was not easy for us. And I don't know how many of you know this, but a little embarrassing to even say that. But Indian cardiologist gets significant large money for putting the stents from including some of the MNCs. It's like corruption. If you give me the money, I'm going to put your stent. This was a very, I didn't know that. It was very embarrassing. It was very challenging for me. It was very difficult for me to accept it. There were very few cardiologists who would really honestly, who were my good friends, were telling me, Manish is a great guy. The product is great. I'm using them. I don't care about it. But the whole system, having a second parallel economy, and some of the MNCs have created some significant new challenges and barriers for small companies to succeed because of their hands in their pockets, basically. So I'm going back onto this right now, the regulatory affairs now. Now, Indian market regulatory affairs were fragmented. There was no structure and data during the time in 2009 and 10. Things have significantly changed from 2014, 16, and I'll come back to those slides very late in this presentation. So we decided to see if we can get a Europe CE mark. To get the FDA level trial in America, it's going to cost you millions and millions of dollars. We were a small company. We did not have that level of comfort, and we didn't want to dilute our company to the point, and nobody was willing to put $50 million into the company at that time to do a very large trial in America. So this is like you are on a suicide mission if you have to go through that journey. So we decided that let's go to the Europe CE mark first. If that becomes a next step for us, how are we going to get there? So we started meeting the notified bodies there. We started calling there. We started going to them. We figured it out what are the market and landscape in Europe is and where and how we can position ourselves to get our technology get done. So we went there, met with a couple of people over there. We interviewed with so many, there were so many notified bodies here. There was like multiple FDA kind of agencies and consultants. Finally, we narrowed it down to 2 people who had the same level of intensity, passion to bring a small company and a startup companies out to the next level. We worked with them. It took a journey about 3 to 4 years for us to get our Europe CE mark. But that was the beginning of a change of our validation and our existence as a small company coming from Surat, India into the world market. So once we got that Europe CE mark done, then I think suddenly the new challenge is that we had to go back to our investors. We had to go back to our board and find out we need some more money. We need some more R&D funding. We need to create OEM partnership. We need to come with some distribution. We need to start doing some registrations in multiple different countries. So I'm working with Manish one-on-one with many of this phone conversation, trying to create a meeting before a meeting, meeting after a meeting, making sure that all the board members are individually being prepared for this meeting. And those are little things that I'm talking about right now is critical. And I learned from my own leadership in my cardiology world, a meeting before a meeting is more important than a meeting itself. And a meeting after a meeting is more important than a meeting itself. Those are very critical elements in any and all conversation because you don't want surprises when you walk into the meeting with some agenda and some conclusion that you are trying to achieve. So make sure you know your stakeholders in your board, you know who are the people who are the movers and shakers and influencers, and make sure they are on your side and or you have taken the time to show them that why you want this, what is the reason, and how you're going to get there, and they become your spokesperson. This is an inside story you won't find in any of the books, by the way, that you will probably be able to learn it on your own mistakes. So I'm just wanted to share with you, though this was the beginning of getting a funding for us to start a company and a manufacturing OEM relationship in Europe. Suddenly our market changed. Suddenly our visibility changed. Every co-AOL of the Europe wanted to meet with us. They wanted to work with us. We have now got about 4 different trials right now going on in Europe in last 4 years that we have started now with Antonio Colombo's, and we have got some trials with Luca Testa and Bernardo Cortese. So we have got few trials in Italy, some couple of them in London, and some multi-center trials now. And we have enrolled more than 600 patients already in last 3 years. So this is going to be the next, hopefully the validation of our technology. And as the interim results are looking very encouraging, I am not allowed to talk about the actual details. Going back to, I know, the sales and marketing, which is also important, how you manage yourself without giving an under the table money or trying to entice the doctors to use it. It was very critical for us to make sure our credibility is not challenged by our own sales team, and our integrity as a company and a founder and the innovators are never going to be compromised because of the money and because of the continued second parallel economy going on in India. And last but not the least, during the time, we have to stay ahead of the competition. So me and Manish will go to every conferences, every place. I'll make sure that we have every articles read. We have met with every and all scientists around the world. Most of the MNCs wanted to meet with us on any and all conferences when we go. They're all R&D team want to know what we are doing, where we are going, what's our polymer is, where we are going with our nanotechnology, how we are nanotizing this technology, what machines we are using. Minute details, and we have to be very careful and mindful about what we can reveal, what we cannot reveal. They were all looking for, in my opinion, either create a joint venture, take our technology, license our technology, use our platform. However, many times I got the feel from inside that they wanted to basically buy us out in a small number, basically, and then kill our technology or kill our competition. And that was the determination me and Manish and a team together found out, that we are not going to let anybody destroy us. We are not going to let anybody take over us. We are not going to let anybody drive our train and a bus. We are going to be the drivers. We are going to take our challenge, and we are going to go slow, but we are going to make an impact. It has been a journey from 2009 now to 2017. So what lessons we learned, I'm going to go through this very quickly. And I have my cards here. I was supposed to be reading through my cards, but I'm left keeping over here on the side right now. But I think the one thing I learned in my life, never give up an idea. If you get an idea in your life, never, ever, ever. And make sure the idea is of something which is big, something which is going to blow you away. And at that point of time, make sure you start doing your research and start looking into it. And instead of the first aha moment comes, you better not ignore it. Be open-minded, like I was with my wife on that day to meet with this guy that changed the journey of the company, changed the journey for me as a medical director, changed me as a cardiologist and an innovator. So keep your ideas, meet with the right people, keep your open mind. Working with ambitious and driven people is very critical for us not to give up the idea to too easy and take an exit quick. Of course, you want to validate like I did. When I met with Manish, I had to go and meet with the experts. I had to meet with my friends. I had to go around the world, meeting with the Patrick Suris, the Marty Leons, Roxana. I had to go over across the world to make sure that I am involving myself before that I wanted to confirm everything that we did together. Created the roadmap to make sure what is our ultimate destination, and we're going to go through that bumpy roads and multiple detours. We'll have some red lights and yellow lights and some green lights, and we have to go through that, and we have to make sure that we reach there. Of course, you want to invest your money, but more importantly, your time, your intellect, your social capital, your knowledge, and your experience. Once you get in, I can tell you, assure you, the dividends will be there, but have patience, have a little bit more. Stick like-minded investors with you who are not going to be just there for the journey of how to multiply their money, but how to change the world together. And I hope that India, from distance standpoint, from the domestic challenges standpoint, will not stop any one of you in this room to consider India as your market for research, India as a market for possible marketing and sales and distribution. The summary is about the same. I really got this, and I wanted to show you this, how the attitude of the person can change. And please pardon me for me a little bit long, but hey, I have to get this. How do I'm going to play this? Can you help me to play this? Because I think this is a very interesting journey, and I think this is going to leave a profound impact. A man with a passion, intensity, skills, what he went through, where he started, and one mentor, one coach, one meeting, and one crisis changes his world. Does it play? I'm sorry, guys. I'm not a... Oh, okay. Here we go.
Enough. I can't stand it watching you close my eyes and embarrass myself in front of thousands of people in a live stadium. So I tried to change quite a transformation from a screaming, racket throwing, swearing kind of brat on the tennis court to this calm guy you know today.
The purpose of this, that many of us sitting in this room today have the similar skills. Many of us have today, we have the dreams, and many of us have the ideas to go further. And I think we don't have too much time here, but can you go to the next year? How do you get there? I'll leave with some slide that I have got together for you about India landscape and what's happening in India, and I'll try and walk you through. And this slide deck should be available on the webcast, I believe, right? For people to look at it. Boy. When they prepared this for me, they told me it is going to walk through quickly. And did it go through my final slides? The last 6 slides. So some of the startup initiatives and opportunities I'm going to walk you through quickly about this slides. I don't know how much time I have, and I will try not to be too authoritative on this. These are the people making a difference in America and the world right now, coming from Indian origin. If you look at this slide carefully, the number on the top 5, the number of doctoral graduates coming out of India are in the top 4. We have more than 1,000 startup companies coming out every year after year right now in India. The India startup landscape is changing. If you look at these circles over there and donors over there from 2014 to 16, how the government is changing, doing business for ease, how the entrepreneurship environment is changing, and how the industry is now taking initiatives with their employees and taking this to the next level like Google is doing. The global comparison, if you look at it, India is becoming the top 3 in the world outside the USA, United Kingdom, and competing head-to-head with China and Israel. And I know you're going to have some lecture on those too. The global comparison is also shown. Now, if you look at the tier 1 cities of India today, where the 80% of your startup companies are happening is Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai. If you look at this slide, very interesting, the demographic of the founders, what you see here, 50% of the founders are over 30 years of age. So when you are old, doesn't mean that you can't do something new or innovate. 50% of the startup founders have engineering background, and I'm hoping that we bring that physician entrepreneurship in healthcare more along with the engineers. The 30% growth in the student environment and significant number of new partnership is happening or new entrepreneurship happening and leadership from the female startups. Funding is increasing as we go in 2016 to 17, and it's year after year, it's increasing over there. The significant number of investors are coming still. The United States and Japan are the biggest investors in India today in Indian markets. The health tech vertical year by year growth is happening year after year, 28%, and twice the investment dollar is going into India year after year today. Of course, the new incubators and accelerators happening across the world. It's happening the same way in India today. And here is the very important slide where I thought the Startup India initiative started by Mr. Narendra Modi, who visited your country also, has been very actively engaged right now to invite, engage, and give an amazing opportunity for many startup companies in India through many of the incentives of tax credits and the patent portfolios and how do you get the money back, etc. Anyway, I end my discussion today here. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you got some inside story about my innovations and my journey with the startup companies. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinesh. That's a multifaceted talk, and we're very thankful that you came here and gave it today. Thank you very much. Dinesh will be around all day, so people can take the opportunity to speak to him as well. Yeah. Great, okay, thanks. So our next speaker is going to be speaking on China's changing medical device market. A primer and partnership and investments will be from Peng, who is a general partner at Novatio Ventures Incorporated. Peng is the founder and general partner of Novatio Ventures, early stage life sciences investment and advisory firm in Toronto, Boston, Hong Kong. Peng has more than 15 years of experience in the life science industry. He's worked as an attorney, senior executive, and investor at leading firms including Teva, Amgen, PR Capital, and Torys. Big part of Peng's work at Novatio Ventures is to help in portfolio companies and accessing Chinese markets and capital from China. By the way, for people who are standing at the back, there are many seats here, so please take a seat. It's not so comfortable to stand, so please make yourself comfortable. And if I can call on Peng to give our second lecture. Sure. Thanks. Okay, sit.
Well, thank you very much, Brad, for your introduction, and a big thanks to Brian Courtney for inviting me to this great event. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm a big fan of the innovation program here at Sunnybrook, and certainly have seen the output of this program both within this building and also out in the marketplace. So certainly very privileged to be a part of, to be able to contribute a little bit to the great work that you're doing here. I've been asked to speak, maybe give some intelligent thoughts about the Chinese market, which is very a market that is a significant part of our work on a day-to-day basis at Novatio Ventures. So, you know, I thought about how I should be presenting this information, what our experiences are in this market, and what would be most helpful to you. And I thought I'd be a little provocative this morning by presenting a thesis to you that I hope will spur some discussion and some questions and comments from the audience, which I think will also give me a better sense of the topics and the information that would be most important to you. And my thesis to you is that as a Canadian medtech company, your number one market should be China, not the US, not Japan, not Europe, but China. And hopefully I'll present you with some data and information that supports this thesis. And I certainly look forward to your comments and questions. So I'll start this presentation by just giving you a glance of what the Chinese market is all about when it comes to medical devices. It's the second largest in the world by expenditure. There's some variance in the data out there in terms of whether China is really the second or the third at the present time, but certainly the projections are it will become the second largest market in the world in short order, if not already. The 2017 is expected to total expenditure in 2017 is expected to be around $60 billion. What's perhaps more important than the overall market size is the actual growth rate. This market has been growing at a clip about 20% per year since 2009. This growth rate is plateauing a little bit, but it's expected to, between 2017 and 2020, to sustain a growth rate of around low teens to mid-teens. And that is in comparison to about less than 5% for the US, about less than 4% for the rest of the BRIC countries, and less than 3% for Japan. So the market opportunity certainly exists from basically a volume and a growth perspective. And imports accounts for about 40% of this market currently. And that import number is going to be decreasing over time. And that's a very important part of the message that I'm trying to convey this morning. What's supporting this growth and the overall market is demographics. China has a rapidly aging population. By 2020, about 400 million Chinese are going to be more than 60 years old. And by 2050, that number is going to grow to about 500 million. And what's also important, unfortunately, I neglected to include on the slide, is that there is a huge, as everyone knows, a huge emerging middle class in China. And that provides the monetary engine for the growth of any market, certainly the healthcare market. And that middle class currently is so large that it's the world's third most populous country on its own, if you just count by those numbers. So certainly from a demographic perspective and based on the emergence of this large middle class, what you're seeing in the marketplace is both an increase in the volume of patients that require care, and also a better living standard and the expectation of higher quality care. From a payer perspective, this is also what's driving the growth or the future growth of this market. China just in 2014 released its first 5-year blueprint for the healthcare sector, the first time in history that it's done that. And then basically this blueprint will rapidly expand the infrastructure and access to more quality healthcare across the country. Part of this expansion is building more hospitals, which is a phenomenon that we're not really used to in the West anymore. So currently, the government, public hospital institutions provides the vast majority of the care delivered in the Chinese, in China. And there are about 4.5 beds per 1,000 patients currently. And the government is looking to increase the number of publicly funded beds from that 4.5 number currently to about 6 beds per 1,000 citizens in 2020. What's also very important is that the government has also now opened access for private capital to flow into the hospital market. So just in the last couple of years since this blueprint has been put in place, there's a rapid expansion of privately funded hospitals in China. Right now, we're looking at about 0.5 beds per 1,000 patients within the private hospital sector. And that is expected to grow to 1.5 beds per 1,000 patients. So you're looking at a 3-fold increase in the next 5 years. But what's the counterpoint to this blueprint as a catalyst for growth of the medical device sector is that within this blueprint, there are also a number of cost containment measures. So the expansion of tendering, the utilization of bundled reimbursements, and also the preference for lower cost products and services is also part of this blueprint, which provides that counterpoint, which may limit the the projected growth. But the thought is that in this environment, given where this initiative is headed, is a phenomenon of certainly high tides floats all boats. What I should emphasize here, and it goes back to my previous point about being local, is that there's a Made in China initiative also being rolled out in parallel with this healthcare blueprint, which will certainly favor locally manufactured medical devices within the reimbursement and pricing regime. And I'll get into how Canadian companies can actually take advantage of this phenomenon as opposed to looking at it as a potential threat. And from a regulatory perspective, the situation is also improving. Typically, when we think about China, we think about a market where there are complex, opaque regulations that are generally viewed as hurdles. And the government in the last few years has certainly gone out of its way to streamline regulatory processes. Just in January of this year, a set of guidelines have been tabled to basically allow medical device manufacturers to utilize clinical data generated outside of China for local regulatory approval. And it's the first time specific requirements have actually been laid out to allow for the utilization of that data. Certainly is from both a time and effort perspective, a gain for foreign device innovators. And about 2 years ago, the government rolled out the Green Channel Initiative for Innovative Products, which is essentially a priority review, accelerated review process that allows for innovative products to reach the market sooner, go through a more transparent, more structured regulatory process. And that's certainly advantageous to Canadian medical device innovators. So at this point, given everything that I've said about the advantages of being a local Chinese company, how does it relate to Canadian medical device innovators? What I want to get the point across is that you don't need to move your company to China. You don't need to essentially leave the market where the innovation is being grown out of in order to be a local product that benefits from the host of local policies and the local marketplace in China. And so I will modify my thesis a little bit in that not only should China be the #1 market, you should consider localizing your technology, your product in China to take advantage of that market. And I'll show you some data that hopefully will be persuasive on this thesis. First is looking at market traction. The reason why the industry is growing as is and attracting capital as is because companies are making money. Companies are making money not because China, but certainly a good part of this growth is because China started at a place where it was behind the West in terms of healthcare and medical device innovation. So when you start at ground zero, certainly you expect the growth rate to be much higher than the West. But what this chart shows is that if we look at the leading multinational companies and leading Chinese companies, what you're seeing is that the growth in the market is being captured by local companies. These companies are growing faster compared to their multinational counterparts. The green bars there are revenues, annual revenues in 2010. The blue bars are annual revenues in 2015. What you're seeing is the leading Chinese medical device companies growing at certainly multiples within that 5-year period compared to their international counterparts. And not only are they growing fast, but they're also much more efficient. So this is looking at and by the way, I should attribute both of these charts to the Boston Consulting Group, which mined the data and presented the data this way. This is a cost breakdown of mid-tier ultrasound device manufacturers in China. And what this shows is that although multinationals may initially generate higher revenues in China, but they also incur higher costs. So Chinese companies are actually more efficient, although they may generate lower revenues, they're also incurring lower costs. As a result, from a profitability perspective, is roughly equal. So certainly, it's an expected result, right? Local companies are going to know the local landscape, and they're going to be able to operate more efficiently, even though they may not have, at the start, the type of resources that are available for multinational companies. And that market traction is certainly now reflected in both the valuation of these medical device companies and also the exit points for investors and founders. This is looking at a ranking of stock market performance based on initial public offering proceeds. And you can see in 2016 and 17, the Chinese exchanges certainly consistently rank amongst the top in the world in terms of IPO performance. And when we look at a breakdown of that performance in 2016 and 17 being on the top and 2016 being on the bottom, what we see is that healthcare is within the top 5 sectors. And what's also very interesting is that devices and diagnostics accounts for about 25% of those exits, which is certainly a much higher percentage than what we would expect in both Europe and North America. Again, speaking to this window of opportunity within China that exists for medical device companies. And when we look at a valuation perspective, and this is where there's a bit of lack of data, at least the data that I couldn't find. But this is interesting data compiled by McKinsey, looking at the growth in market capitalization by top Chinese biopharmaceutical companies versus their US counterparts. And we see this interesting pattern that Chinese companies are consistently being valued at a good multiple compared to their US counterparts. And this pattern, based on my own experience in China, and also based on conversations that I've had with my colleagues in China in both the VC and private equity space, this pattern carries right through to medical devices and diagnostics. In fact, it may even be higher for in vitro diagnostics than biopharmaceuticals. So, from a startup company perspective, a Canadian medtech company, what's important to you, during the development stage? You're interested in raising money to continue your R&D work and to reach market, and you're interested in raising money at a valuation that you think is fair for your contributions, for your innovation, and I think the Chinese market provides, at least currently, provides those conditions. And this is reflected in some of the data that we can find on the availability of capital in China. This is a look at the growth in capital raised by Chinese life sciences companies from 2010 to 2017. What's not surprising is the explosive growth that we're seeing in the past decade or so. And the scale is in renminbi, so the conversion really is that last year, total amounts raised in China from venture capital sources were $7.5 billion, which is something very comparable, although it still lags behind the US. But what's interesting is that if we break down those numbers, we see that there is actually higher risk appetite for Chinese investors, especially in the earlier rounds, where as a proportion of the total amount of funds raised, we see Chinese investors investing more earlier compared to their US counterparts. And that's important as a startup biotech company here in Canada. So before I get to some of my observations on how you can take advantage of this window of opportunity, I just want to make the comment that again, I go back to, you don't have to lose your Canadian identity to be able to take advantage of the Chinese market. And the way to do that is to look at potential ways to access that market where you are, where you get the benefit of the capital that's available and the access to that market without experiencing some of the potential pitfalls that have tripped up much larger companies in the past. And the key success factor for accessing the Chinese market is finding the right partner. And this is the key success factor beyond all else. And generally, the types of partners that are available are in three flavors. There's a partner that you can find that's a local Chinese company or a local Chinese entity that you form a joint venture with, and you decide to access that market, tackle that market from a development commercialization perspective together. There is a distributor where you can hand off the rights of your product to, and they take over essentially research and development activities and ultimately sales and marketing. Or you decide to go to China on your own and form your own team and establish a local presence. And of course, regardless of which of these three partners you work with, you will need to work with the additional partners that potentially are investors, because regardless of whether you're here or in China, when you start out, you're going to need capital before you reach the market. And also logistical partners who are not necessarily local operators, but what they do provide is local market expertise and insights. So you will work typically with a logistical partner to basically help you supplement your presence and your operations in China. They can bring in the local management team. They can bring in the local R&D team. They can help you fundraise in China. And they essentially provide that external team so that you don't dilute your own bandwidth and prioritization. And when you're considering market entry into China, I go back to what I said about you don't need to be a Chinese company to have a local product, right? A local product that will benefit from the regulatory regimes I described that would be able to access this market in the most efficient way, that has the highest chance of success, can come out of each of these arrangements, right? The requirement is that you have a product that is developed and manufactured in China. And you can do that through distributor relationship, through a partnership, through forming your own subsidiary. And these are, I won't go into this table in a lot of detail, but this essentially weighs some of the pros and cons when it comes to each of the dimensions that may be important to a company in considering how they would enter this market. And the Made in China policy advantage role, I apologize, those no's should be qualified no's. I can't leave this presentation without talking about the potential hurdle to accessing the Chinese market. And there really is, I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't come up with lists of three, usually just one for me, and that is culture. Culture is cultural differences in business practices and how you deal with government officials, regulatory agencies, customers, and so on, are pervasive. And it's probably usually the single biggest impediment to Western companies being successful in China. And the way to solve these cultural issues to overcome this hurdle is by selecting the right partner. You want to have a trusted partner that can navigate a complex landscape for you, right? China, as I mentioned, generally is thought as being, from a regulatory perspective, from a pricing reimbursement perspective, generally thought as being a complex and opaque environment to operate in. But certainly local companies do that very well. Local partners can do that very well. You don't need to solve those issues. You just need to find the right partner to help you solve those issues. And that's also the way for you to enter into that market without you becoming a Chinese entity. These cartoons are, you can find many of them on the web, and they essentially all speak to the same theme, which is that basically the opacity that exists within business practices and social interactions as well in China, and that getting through that opacity is a very important aspect of being successful in China. And in terms of how I would think about a potential market entry model into China that puts together all of those aspects of partnerships that I've discussed, you may consider a model where you work with a logistical partner, with a joint venture partner, to form a Chinese entity that is funded locally by local investors, taking advantage of the availability of capital within China. And that entity and those would then work with subsequent distributors once you have a product that's ready for sales and marketing. And there are areas of potential conflict within here in that your partners may have different ideas about sales and marketing than you do. Your investors may have certain preferences for certain parties that you should be working with. And those are the types of issues that one would need to navigate and work through when you consider a Chinese market entry strategy. But the rewards, I think, are certainly very worthwhile. That's really the last slide that I have. Love to hear some questions and comments from the audience in terms of the types of issues that may be important to you, and we can do that at the break.
Do we have time for one quick question, or else you covered it really very well. Thanks, Peng, and you'll be available to speak at the break. So, thank you very much for.
And this is just a fun one. So in case you were wondering why those brands were up there, these are just famous brands that are now effectively Chinese brands.
Thank you very much, Peng. That was terrific. So our last presentation of this initial session will be given by Dr. Yair Feld. Yair is very well known to us here at Sunnybrook because he's here currently on an interventional cardiology fellowship for the last 2 years. He is a unique individual. He is from Israel. He trained at the Technion Medical School in Haifa. He is a cardiologist and came here specifically for the interventional cardiology training. And he's already founded 5 companies in Israel. One of them, Paragate, recently was a finalist at the TCT Innovation Competition and was the winner at the ICI Innovation Competition. This is just one of the 5 companies that Yair has founded. So we're extremely happy and pleased that Yair has spent the last 2 years with us. We're trying to work on our own partnerships with Yair. And I think that he can really give a personal insight of what is going on in Israel, which is really a unique player in the innovation space. So the title of his talk is Israel, an open innovation hub for life sciences with a global impact. So thanks very much, Yair, for doing this today.
Here. To the top, actually. Just hold it in the top. Let's see, Zoom will open if you bring to the top. Let's see.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity to present here this talk about Israel as an open innovation hub for life science with a global impact. These are my disclosures. So Israel at a glance, the country was founded in the Middle East in 1948. It has a little bit less than 9 million people. It is more or less the size of Lake Ontario, depending on your political point of view, and it is very, very hot. So is Israel an innovation hub? That's the first question, and this slide was taken from the TCT, as just discussed, and what you see in this slide is the final of the Shark Tank competition, and 2 out of 3 companies, Enopace Medical and Paragate Medical, coming from Israel. Very unusual for such a small country, I would say. Israel is number 3 in the world in terms of patent per capita, and by far number 1 in venture capital investment per capita. And I now want to briefly show you a few of the really groundbreaking medical devices that were developed in Israel in the past, I would say, 20 years. Of course, there were many other, but these are really, I think, important. This is the PillCam. It's basically a camera mounted on a capsule, invented by Dr. Gabi Idan, who is an electro-optical engineer from Rafael. And the idea here is to have to get an imaging of the intestine in an area where it is very, very difficult to reach with regular endoscopy. This is what he used to develop at Rafael. So you can see where he got the inspiration. And he just thought he can make it small enough for the body. Another groundbreaking device is the Carto system, which is was developed by Biosense Webster, later on bought by Johnson & Johnson. This is a catheter that combines an anatomical positioning catheter together with electrophysiology catheter and enables 3-dimensional mapping of the cardiac electrophysiology. And this helps later on in understanding many of the cardiac arrhythmia pathologies and also treatment of many of the cardiac arrhythmia pathologies. And nowadays, every advanced electrophysiology lab has this system in there. And this was also taken from an army-based technology of a pilot helmet that can say exactly where the helmet orientation and implement it in a medical field. Another very important breakthrough that happened in the past 20 years is the transcatheter aortic valve implantation. So until not many years ago, the only way to get the valve implantation was by open heart surgery. And this company, PVT, that was later on bought by Edward, developed in Israel by Israeli engineer, the Sapien valve, the first transcatheter aortic valve implantation. Which was a really groundbreaking technology and opened the whole field of structural heart disease, basically. So maybe not all of you cardiologists, so I'm waiting for the end just to see the way it's done. The catheters, once we have a wire in the ventricle, then we advance the catheter, and on the catheter there is a balloon expandable valve. So it looks very simple, but it took more than 20 years to develop this technology. But now it's simple. It takes about a few hours, and the patient can go home the next day in many cases. And the last company I want to show you, another breakthrough, also bought by Edward for a lot of money, Valtech, is also in the structural heart area. It's a transcatheter mitral annuloplasty, which is a device that enables the treatment of mitral regurgitation, also in a transcatheter manner. The device is already has approved in Europe and will probably be approved also in North America in the very near future. I think will be another big hit in this area. Israel was also involved in many of the early stents, Medinol and InStents, and of course many other technology, but these are really just big things. So what is the cause? Maybe people used to say Jews are the people of the book. Unfortunately, this is not the case nowadays, at least not in Israel. Apparently, we are quite below the average of the OECD in terms of our reading habits. In general, if we look at our education system, we are below average, and I'm comparing to the OECD in terms of investment, in terms of mathematics performances, reading performances, science performances. And the only thing we are above average here is use not in employment, education, or training, which my kids basically. So what did happen in Israel? I think there were two major triggers for the development of Israel as a big innovation hub. One very big trigger is the fact that Israel was founded in a hostile environment and needed a very, very strong technology and defense forces. And they founded a very strong, highly technological industry. And as you saw in the examples I show you, this was a trigger for many of the medical device development and also in other areas, also in the high-tech industry. Another important thing about this industry is they provide the atmosphere for research and development. So it was all based on taking a project, development of a technology-oriented thing. Nowadays, maybe you've heard about the Iron Dome or a new technology now to find tunnels that is a security issues. So it all brings a certain way of thinking, of taking a problem, taking a need, budgeting the need, and developing the solution. Another very important trigger was in the early 1990s, there was a big, highly educated immigration from Russia. And the government wanted to find a solution for employment for these highly educated people, and they formed the Incubators program. I will later on talk a little bit in more details about this program, which enables basically a certain person to come with an innovative idea, get funding, recruit team, and start. Once many small startup companies started to grow, it built up the atmosphere and the need for an infrastructure. More people came to the field, venture capital funding came to Israel. A big strategic company came to Israel because they knew many startups are coming. And I think the large amount of small startup company was basically the driving force for later on building a whole industry that later on fed itself and grew all together. What I would like to show you now is basically the companies that I presented in the TCT and was probably the trigger for me being here. The company was also founded in an incubator program based on an idea that I had as an internal resident in Rambam. And the company developed an implantable device for fluid overload patients. So heart failure patients are facing two major problems. The first one is repeat hospitalization, which is the #1 cause for hospitalization above the age of 65. And the second one is chronic congestion that lead to shortness of breath and peripheral edema. This has become extremely problematic in patients that are diuretic resistant, that do not respond to current medication. And what we do in Paragate, we develop an implantable device that enables constant extracellular fluid removal in a predetermined rate. The device is composed of 3 components: a chamber that is implanted in the peritoneum, covered with a semi-permeable mesh, a pump that induces constant negative hydrostatic pressure in the chamber, and a pigtail catheter that drains the fluid to the urinary system. As in peritoneal dialysis, we use negative oncotic pressure gradient in order to draw extracellular fluid. Here, we use negative hydrostatic pressure gradient in order to extract extracellular fluid through the peritoneal membrane. And it is important to understand at this point that the patient does not need to have ascites for this device to work. The device large surface area in contact with the peritoneal membrane enabled access to the extracellular compartment. The device is implanted in a laparoscopic procedure. First, we implant a mesh. Then an anatomically compliant spiral wire is inserted into this mesh. Then a pump is implanted subcutaneously, and lastly, a pigtail catheter to the urinary system to drain the fluids. And we've conducted the proof of concept in 10 pigs and 37 rats. This is a pig post-implantation, this is the device on X-ray, and this is the implantation process. We've also develop miniature devices for rats, and we were able to draw 0.3% of the rat body weight per hour throughout the 6 weeks walk, which represent drawing like 5 liters a day from a patient that would weigh 70 kilograms. This is, of course, much more than we need. And in large animals, in pigs, we were able to draw about 250 cc per day. When we infuse the animal with a high bolus of saline and increase the central venous pressure from 7 to 16, we were able to increase the drainage rate from 0.14 to 0.29, double the drainage rate. When we look at the content of this fluids that we drain in blue here compared to the serum, sodium, potassium, phosphorus, it's all the same as the serum, which is not entirely surprising. This is an extracellular fluid. Sorry. However, when we compare the albumin in the drained fluid, it is a third of the albumin in the serum, which is not entirely surprising since albumin is a large molecule that cannot shift easily between compartments. When we look at the device, 6 weeks post-implantation, it's easily extractable, no significant adhesion, and no significant inflammation. So when we look at the market for this device, there are 26 million patients worldwide with heart failure. Out of them, 30% with New York Heart Association class 3 and 4. These are advanced heart failure patients that are constantly symptomatic. 55% are what we call wet and warm, which are fluid overloaded. This represents 4 million patients worldwide, 750,000 in the US. This represents a total market of $3.5 billion per year. So most of the focus today in the treatment of heart failure patient is on remote monitoring and in-clinic acute treatment with the intravenous diuretic. We are proposing a fully implantable device that can continuously extract or drain extracellular fluid in a predetermined rate based on the physician adjustment. So going back to innovation, so what is needed for innovation? I think the first thing is atmosphere, but more importantly is funding. In Israel, in the past 10 years, was #1 in investment in research and development. Early stage funding opportunity is extremely important. And I want to go over what does the incubator offer. And this is how I founded all my companies through incubator programs. It offers appropriate facilities and infrastructure, offices, and sometimes also laboratories. Financing, the entrepreneur can get about $500 for 2 years project, can recruit 2 to 3 people, and produce some advancement in the development to the phase that hopefully it will be more attractive for venture capital funding. 85% of this $500,000 is sponsored by the government and 15% by an industry partner, basically the owner of the incubators. There are 24 incubators in Israel, and most of them are owned by at least partially by big strategic companies like Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, Philips, Teva. All these companies take share in those incubators to get interest and to get a hold of these new technologies. They provide central administrative services, management and technical assistance. The managers of these incubators are usually highly experienced people in the field in the innovation field, and have done themselves a few innovations and can provide mentoring for the young CEOs that comes in with their projects. Connectivity to potential customers. So many of the venture capital funds come to those incubators to look for companies to invest in, and they know about those incubators. Also, venture capitals from abroad, from the US, come to Israel. They go to those incubators. They look for new technologies. So it provides a very nice hub. And lastly, inter-tenant synergism. When you work with many young CEOs together, they can fruitful themselves. They can have a very good synergism between themselves, and it is also very important. Lastly, recruiting working teams. So now that we have many people in different fields in Israel that are working in innovation, it is relatively easy to find experts in all the fields: regulatory, engineering, medical directors, clinical directors, etc. And large-scale multi-million funding. This, I would say, the biggest challenge nowadays everywhere. And this is a global problem with medical device. In Israel, what we're doing, we are also looking at China. There has been a lot of investment from China in Israel in medical devices. And this is it's very important to be open globally when you look for funding, and basically to look everywhere. But it's a big challenge. And this is what I wanted to say. I would love to hear a question if you have about how you start a company, what's the process. I'd just like to mention this flag of Canada and Israel. We have also, there are grants together between Canada and Israel, sponsored by the Ontario government and the Israeli government, where you can have initiatives, combined initiatives, and we are hopefully will be involved in one very soon. Thank you.
We have about 1 or 2 minutes before the break. Any questions for any of our speakers this morning? Okay, I think we'll give you a good coffee break. So we'll break till 10:30, and we'll reconvene at that time. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. And the break is next door.